So now let's focus on the films themselves. So the first film that's part of this set, or on the first disc, is the film from 1975, and this is the film India Song. And among its cast, its great cast, we have people like Mathieu Carrière and Michael Lonsdale, and of course, the one, the only, Delphine Seyrig, and many others. And we have here a story. If we were to try to focus on the story of India Song, we understand it's set in the early part of the 20th century in India, with regard to this embassy house or embassy place in India, a French embassy, and we understand a woman, Delphine Seyrig's character, who is apparently the ambassador's wife, although we get a sense immediately, or almost immediately, that there are many people in her life with whom she's had relationships, and there are specifically a number of men that she has come to know and come to become, intimately and emotionally involved with. And there's a sense in which they are together in one place, in one setting, apparently, but also there's a sense of a fragmentation in terms of a visitation of, say, various points of her life and memory and the like. And so this is already a sense of the type of cryptic, haunting nature of the assemblage of moments and pieces of cinema combined in India Song, in that there is a way in which we have the assembly of characters and personages within one singular setting on the one hand, but then we have a sense too of how there is a type of isolating element where we may or may not be watching something that is actually happening currently in the moment, or we may or may not be watching something that is in fact more elliptical and more cryptic, and having to do with a type of subjective viewpoint of a type of forced perspective on reality, which is based on a type of psychological nature, which is in turn linked to one's emotional feelings about oneself, and maybe certain chances and opportunities, or certain losses, or certain regrets, etc., about one's life. And this is, I think, centralized in the characterization of Delphine Seyrig. So this is very already we're getting into a lot of very interesting stuff when it comes to cinema, right? Because we see already that this form of cinema storytelling is itself a type of maybe, and I mean this very complimentarily, a type of, on one hand, a surface level view of certain cinematic grammatical points of, say, time and place, 1930s embassy housing, India, and we have reminders of this in terms of the interiors and the exteriors, and also we have an assembly of characters that seem to be dressed up, that seem to be part of some kind of gathering or social gathering. However, there is an organization, and there's a way, or a purposefully applied lack of organization, whatever the case may be, how you might interpret it, that might suggest to us that what we are seeing is in fact something, what we think we are seeing might be in fact something else. What we think might be on one level a type of purposefully assigned context in terms of time and place might in fact reveal something more interior and more, say, pondering, and more about some kind of subjective viewpoint, thinking and feeling and regretting and longing, etc. And then when we get into the story of this woman, and we get an indication or a feeling about what it is she might be feeling vis-a-vis these various people that she has known, or she has come to know over the course of, say, various circumstances of her life, we realize too that the stakes are perhaps more heightened than we might have thought at the start of the film. And perhaps the idea and notions and subjective feelings and haunting memory, and the way in which interior and exterior seem to swirl around each other, the idea of being in a place, India, with the outdoors and the setting, and the and the landscape shots that are also integrated with the shots of the interior and hallways where people are together but they are not together. They are gathered but not gathered. They are in the place in the moment but they are completely removed from the place or the moment. They might be walking down the hall but in fact their mind and heart are completely elsewhere, etc., etc. When we get this sense of being and nothingness, when we get a sense of being there and not being there, and when we think about the heightened emotional stakes of the film as we progress from scene to scene to scene, I think we begin to realize that this idea, as exemplified in the styling of the film, being there and not being there, being in the moment but not being in the moment, being outside but also being inside, being is and again, to the perennial question, to be or not to be. That, I think, perfectly perfectly embodied in the style of the film, with the sense of the unity of soundtrack, the voices, the dialogue, and the lines of dialogue that we hear on the one hand, but then the scenes that we see. And there's also a sense of unity and integration, but also a sense of disembodiment and isolation. They seem to be connected but not connected at the same time. And that type of cinematic styling combined with an emotional reflex also leads to, I think, another interesting indication, again, heightened stakes, life and death. And that sort of almost existential underpinning of the film, as exemplified and embodied by, among many things, the cinematic style of the film, not least of which being the approach to the audio versus the approach to the visual, I think make for really, 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 really compelling viewing indeed. I must, once again, I must say, as I mentioned earlier, when I saw this film many, many years ago, when I was much younger, I didn't get it. I don't claim to get it now, but when I was much younger, I really, really didn't get it, to the point where I wasn't quite keen on the film. But over the years, as I've grown older and I've had the opportunity of revisiting this film, it has not just grown on me, but it has really, really hooked me. And so it haunts me. And upon the occasion of this Criterion release, this gave me the opportunity to rewatch it like this, and I was truly, truly mesmerized and haunted by this, to the point of being very, very moved and struck indeed. This is one of the great, great films, and I so hope that many people are able to watch this film. It might not be for everyone, and I would also suggest that if you're going to watch the film, if you can, try to watch it. Again, no pressure. Of course, you do what you need to do, but if you're able to, and of course, give yourself as much time as you want, but if you're able to, please try to watch it more than once. It is a film that I think might be a little bit jarring upon initial watch, and I completely get that, because I can come at that from subjective experience and my own cinema journey. But believe me, if you watch it a number of times, again, you can give it years, you can give it months, you can give it weeks, you can give it years, depending on how you feel. But I really, really hope that upon rewatch, the power of this film might emerge. And who knows, maybe your sensibilities and your own, say, viewpoints are of a place and such that maybe you feel that way immediately upon initial view. And if that's the case, then good for you. I'm very happy to hear that. And please let me know if you indeed feel that way. And of course, if you ultimately, at the end of the day, you don't like this film at all, please let me know as well. I'm very happy to hear about that. You don't have to agree with everything that I say here on this channel. So, and I'm very happy to hear that, and that's fine, because again, your views are your views, and your reactions are your reactions. But along the same lines, my reactions are my reactions too. And if I were to return to my own reaction to this film, India Song, I would say that this is one of the greats, and this release by Criterion is exciting indeed. So this was the first disc on the set, which is for the film India Song. Now let us, before we move on to the next film, let's just talk briefly about what can be found on this first disc. So just a moment, or just a comment about the transfer. Here, India Song is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1, and it's purported to be based on a new 2K restoration. And I should also point out that the transfer supervisor is Bruno Nuten, the cinematographer. And so this is also, I should point out that there is the option of listening to this with the French language soundtrack, or the back of the disc, the set, for example, indicates newly discovered India Song alternate English language audio track directed by Marguerite Duras. So you have the option of listening to the original, the French language soundtrack, or the English language soundtrack. Now, I watched this film again with the French language soundtrack, but then for purposes of the Criterion release, I now watch this with the English language soundtrack, and I'd never. I would say that while I prefer ultimately the French language soundtrack, I thought that the English language soundtrack viewing of India Song was really quite remarkable. And there's an interesting way that listening to the English language soundtrack makes the film even more alienating. It makes the film even more of a lack of equilibrium between image and sound. And I think that actually gives a further enhancement to this type of feeling of displacement that I was trying to suggest is part of the strength of the film India Song. So while I would say that personally I prefer the French language soundtrack, there is a lot of merit and a lot of strength to watching this film with the now being made available by Criterion, this English language soundtrack. So bravo for being able to include that. I'm very happy with that. So that is the option there. But if you're interested, please listen to one or both, whatever the case may be. So I can definitely recommend both very well. I think they both have their strengths, and so bravo for being able to include that. And then on the first disc, again with India Song, we have two supplements. The first being Shooting India Song, a story in 4 voices. And this is described as being from the year 2020. This is totaling approximately 46 minutes, and this is from essentially 4 participants, or 4 key members of the group that made this film, India Song, as well as some archival footage interviews with Marguerite Duras and Seyric. So the four people that are involved here we have Benoit Jacquot, who is the assistant director, and Bruno Nuten, who is the director of photography, and Geneviève Dufour, assistant editor and script supervisor, and then Stepan Chayajev, who is producer. So this is, and we get there are 4 separate, say, interviews, and then they're edited together. And so they each talk about their own experiences in working with Duras, and specifically in the context of working on India Song, and the idea of bodies and voices. This was a film about bodies and voices, and therefore that is, I think, such a great comment. Because it really is a film about bodies. It is a film about voices, and it's a film about how they are connected or not connected, and that's so apropos because of the way that the film is structured, and we get a sense, therefore, of the unity and lack of unity, and that is so, and also the idea of perception, and also the ability to perceive, and also the inability to perceive what we see in front of us, because we might be completely in a different plane of existence altogether. So, or we might be in the same plane, and that's part of the mystery and wonder of the human condition, a la India Song, a la the voice of Duras. So it's great. And then also comments about this film being about regret, love, and place, the appropriation of place. I think that's really great, because we also have too the undercurrent of the undercurrent of I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call this an overtly political film per se, but there's also the undercurrent of how the appropriation of place does embody a wholly subjective viewpoint of characters, to the point where it almost seems to overwhelm the sense of what one might have otherwise potentially used as a basis of interpretation, namely elements of colonialism, etc. I think that is given a type of more elliptical quality, and it's given a truly subjective injection of cinematic energy. So But this idea of appropriation, I think, is very important, both in terms of one level being the appropriation of place on a wholly subjective, emotional, and psychological level. In other words, you think so much about one's own situation that the place and items of the place become relevant to you. On the one hand, and I think that can be extended outward in terms of the context of 1930s, the embassy situation, France and India, etc. So that kind of appropriation of place as well, I think, on a broader context, can lead to some potential socio-political implications. But I think primarily this appropriation is dealing with a type of psychological and emotional. But there are many myriad possibility of interpretations, that's for sure. But in any event, this comment is being made here, I think very appropriately so. And then also this idea too of the working with the cast, working with the actors, Michael Lonsdale, Delphine Seyrig, of course, and then the idea too of Marguerite Duras as a filmmaker, artist. What kind of things that she was interested in, what were the strengths that she had, what were the things that she was focusing on, how did she communicate certain things. There is a sense, generally speaking, where Duras is described as being, maybe she didn't necessarily speak in very, very highly technical jargon, but that didn't prevent her from getting across the ideas that she wanted to get across, and she got them across very, very clearly. And working with her was, according to these filmmaker artists who worked with her, was a real delight. And so, there was also a great sense of camaraderie as well, which it also comes across in the other supplement that we'll talk about. So 46 minutes. This is a really great indication of the making of India Song. It also leaves bare the idea that there are many anecdotes that are there, but also there are a lot of mysteries and a lot of things that were very much part of just the everyday. And just things kind of happened. And that sort of happenstance led to the brilliance that is India Song. So I love that sense of a type of modesty of character on the one hand, that still reveals this genius level art that is of work like India Song, that is a filmmaker like Duras. So all in all, watching this left me with very, very warm and happy feelings indeed. So strongly suggested. So this is Shooting India Song, a story in 4 voices. This is approximately 46 minutes. And then the second supplement that's found with the India Song disc is Delphine Seyrig, Portrait of the Artist, Delphine Seyrig. And this is from 1977. It's a kind of excerpt type of 6-minute segment. It is in English, and here we have Delphine Seyrig speaking very in this intimate setting, a type of interview type of thing. In the late 70s, I understand. So this is around the time of Baxter, Vera Baxter. So she has already worked, of course, with Duras, and so she's mentioning, among other things, she's mentioning just how much she loves working with Duras. It's a really lovely type of energy that she has, and just that type of devotion and that type of belief and real faith in the works of Duras. It shines through so remarkably. And I must say, too, that Seyrig's performance here in India Song it's one of the key. It's a film that's filled with so many critical elements. Perhaps one of the most important critical elements is the success of the performance by Seyrig, because it's a type of anchor. It's also a type of conduit. It's also a type of vessel in terms of what she is able to create. Because, again, this idea of the enigma. She is and she is not. To be or not to be. And so she is there in the moment, but she's not there in the moment. And again, I'm not coming from any kind of school of acting because I'm not an artist, but I can only imagine the type of difficulty that must have been, the type of challenge that must have posed in terms of the acting, in terms of trying to be in the moment but not be in the moment. But I think that is accomplished with such almost cinematic magnetism that really is another example of why Seyrig is the legend of cinema. That she's a real icon of cinema. One of the reasons being, for example, her work in India Song, and to get her voice and to get her energy and to get her enthusiasm, real lovely enthusiasm with regard to this work, and also working with Duras. It's really great. So you get a sense of this here in this 6-minute segment with Seyrig. And that rounds out the supplements with regard to this disc India song. Again, much like the supplement discussions that we'll have with Baxter Vera Baxter, the second disc, I would have loved to have seen more. It would have been great to see maybe a commentary or hear a commentary track, maybe other discussions about Duras and the career, because Duras's career is really quite voluminous and quite varied, Renaissance level varied. So it would have been great to maybe have something else here or elsewhere about, say, the overview of Duras's career, how India song figures in very importantly in that, other relations with the. It would have been also interesting to see maybe. I'm not sure if it could have been included or not, but of course, again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but some of you may know other works of Duras. In particular, there's a work that comes after this, which in English is called Her Venetian Name in a Deserted Calcutta. It would have been interesting to have, if it had been possible, to have that included as part of India Song, or maybe part of this release, again, because the relationship between India Song and the later film, there's a real key core relationship dynamic between this. So it would have been interesting if something like that had been included, but oh well, that's okay, because we still get the splendor and glory that is the inclusion of India Song here. That's the main feature, the main event in terms of this first disc. So I would have loved to have seen more supplements, don't get me wrong, but it's at the end of the day, what we do get is great, and including that making of featurette, and also the words from Seyrek, and also the film itself. So that's what we have in terms of disc 1.